Hello everyone and welcome to DisruptEDtv, where every little idea can make a difference in your classroom or your school. And our guest today is Robb, who is principal of Johnson Williams Middle School in Berryville, Virginia. Evan, it's a pleasure having you here.
Absolutely.
Thanks for driving all the way up.
Thank you very much.
I want to start continuing really a conversation we had before the program. And I know you're a very strong advocate for the need to change in the classroom. Maybe you can frame that a little bit for us, and we'll talk about specifics.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some exciting things today on DisruptEDtv. And before I even begin, I just want to say what a great job you all do on DisruptEDtv. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
And it's exciting to be here with you all today.
Thanks very much.
Excited to talk about change, and want to frame it up today in change in classrooms, the types of classrooms that many of your viewers may have experienced when they were in school, and the way that classrooms need to change as students move into the 21st century. Because we as educators are teaching students for a future that is hard to define, but we want to make sure that we're preparing our kids for everything. But as we think about that, I like to talk about mindset and how mindset can impact change and how people are receptive to change. But most important is the role of the teacher. And what I always like to do to frame this up is there are 3 seats that are available for any teacher. And I'm going to pose these questions to you gentlemen, but also to anyone who's listening. And I would say this: when you think back to when you were a child and you were in school, and you think back to your teachers, I'm going to say that there are 3 seats that those teachers sat in. There's one group of teachers that you can recall who you did not like. You may have even hated them. You may have very vivid memories of them. There's some that time washes away and you don't remember them at all. But then there's some that changed your life. They changed your trajectory. Now, what I would say is that people who changed your trajectory in life brought an attitude, brought a mindset into the classroom that made a significant difference in how they did what they did, their teaching, and how they treated learners in their classroom.
That's just, so really what we're talking about here is the power of role models and the ability for a teacher to become a role model and reach a student in that way. So maybe then, Evan, you can talk a little bit about growth versus fixed mindset, because that's one of the changes you want to try to encourage.
Yeah, absolutely. Fixed mindset, I'll make it very simple and I'm going to give some examples.
Great.
Fixed mindset is believing that you either can or you can't. And that can apply to anything in life. It can apply to your ability to do mathematics, or it could apply to your ability to do a particular sport. Growth mindset, which is based off of the work of Carol Dweck, is a belief that with opportunity and with effort, you can do something. That it may not come automatically, but with practice, support, and opportunity, that you can. And so I could frame it up. A good example for fixed mindset is mathematics. Many people know someone, or maybe someone in their family, who has a really negative attitude about math. And they're
I'll raise my hand.
I can't be on the check.
Okay.
You know, I was in there too. And so when your child comes home from school and says, you know, I didn't do well on a math test, and you know, often a parent may say, and with the best intentions, well, yeah, I wasn't good at math either. In fact, you know, your grandfather, who we visited in the summer, he wasn't good at math either. No one's been good at math in our family, and generationally bad in mathematics. That is fixed mindset thinking about mathematics. Now, if you apply the example of growth mindset, which is that with time, opportunity, and effort, someone can improve, then there's an opportunity to change that child's path and their perception of mathematics. But that has a lot to do with the teacher and how they have conversations with a parent and how they have conversations with a child to instill hope and opportunities for success.
Well, that's what we're getting into now is an interesting discussion of grades and whether grades are a way to judge a child or to inspire a child. And that really is up to the teacher, isn't it?
It is. It is. And a lot of times, you know, grading is an interesting topic, and I appreciate you bringing that up. We can talk about that for a little bit. My experience is that a lot of teachers grade the way that they were taught. They base it off of experiences that they experienced either through student teaching or through when they were in school. Although that is despite there's a tremendous amount of research on what best practice is with grading. And so there's a weird dichotomy in that a lot of grading that occurs in schools is not necessarily in conjunction with the most current research. It's often based off of past experiences or things that people think they should do.
Habits and silos that people get into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't say that it's born out of bad intentionality. I don't think people
Sure.
purposely go about trying to grade bad, but it just simply may not be born out of best practice and research. You know, one of the things, to give you a good example in our conversation, let's talk about the average. And let's talk about the average in terms of fixed mindset, growth mindset, and how that can potentially be a problem within a classroom. So I'll give you all an example.
Great.
So let's say that we want to learn how to run better, and we're going to run the mile. So we go out to a track and we work on running the mile. And we all run at the same time. We're all going to run a 12-minute mile. Now, if we have really solid fixed mindset thinking, we might say, you know, that was a really bad experience. I am not good at running the mile. I'm going to find another sport to pick up. But let's say we said we can get better at the mile, but we need to practice. And so we start training. And then the 12-minute mile turns into a 10-minute mile. And then we train, and maybe we get a coach, someone who can give us some real expert advice and help us train with purpose. And then our mile time goes down again. So it goes from 12 to 10, all the way down to an 8-minute mile. Then my question would be, this is a tough one, you guys ready, right?
Yeah, we're ready.
12, 10, 8. How fast do we run the mile?
8.
Okay.
Because that's the fastest time.
8 represents your ability
That's-
in running the mile.
That's what I can do.
Okay, but let's put that into a grade book now.
Right.
And let's say that a student makes a poor grade on assessment number 1, but then they get some support, and then they get some help. But ultimately, by the final assessment, which is the summative assessment, which is representative of all of the learning that occurred in that unit, they make a very good grade. Mathematically, if you average, is that going to give the best representation of that child's grade? So what I would say is that if you have growth mindset thinking, you're going to say, well, the final assessment captured this child's knowledge and the child has an A. But if you want to pull the average in, or you want to move into a different type of thinking, you're going to mathematically add up and then divide all of those numbers, and you'll get an average grade. But that grade will not necessarily be representative of the child's knowledge of the information.
Well, that's
Just like the mile example that we were just talking about.
right.
It is an 8-minute mile. It's not the combination of 12, 10, and 8 divided by 3.
So the teachable moment here for instructors who might be watching the program is that a grade really is a point-in-time reflection of a learner's capabilities. And we need to apply grading in a flexible way that allows learners to grow to a point that they're capable of, rather than get stuck in a spot that a poor grade might have left them in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think rigidity in any form is not good. It's not good if you are in a profession other than education, and it's not good in education either. Flexibility is very important. Flexibility in grading, flexibility in instructional methodology, flexibility in seating. I mean, you all can probably recall when you all were in grade school or middle school, I bet you that every classroom was a beautiful row. A really straight, and I had the same thing. In fact, I can recall being in an English class when I was in middle school, and the rows were lettered. So it was row A, B, C, D, and then it was numerical going
Like a
back.
bingo card.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. I didn't win any bingo in that class though. So I was E3. That was my number, and that's the type of thinking that we need to move away from, because a lot of things that are in our past are best to be left in the past.
Are best to be left in the past, which is so. Now, okay, let me try to push back a little bit on this from the point of view of a teacher who might be watching the program. I have 30 kids in my classroom. You're telling me I need to be flexible. How can I possibly be flexible when I have so many kids to teach?
Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to start thinking about what you're doing and if there's a different way to do it. And that's the cool thing about your program, which is DisruptEDtv. So what I would say is, the first thing I would say is you need to start thinking about disrupting your routine. Because whatever you're doing is giving you what you're getting. You know, the classic definition of insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. So intentionality is important, and it's important to think about what you're doing, reflect, and then possibly let go. You know, I always like to talk about the, you guys probably remember the Peanuts cartoon. You fans of Peanuts?
Sure.
Yes, we're growing up. Remember little Linus? So Linus was famous for carrying his blanket, and he would carry his blanket with him everywhere. And so what I would say is everyone has a blanket, metaphorically speaking.
Security blanket.
Absolutely. And so the first thing I always challenge people is, what is the blanket that you are carrying, and can you let go of it? And realize that if you let go of it, that might be scary, and it might make you uncertain about what the future will be. But it's the best chance to be able to create something new and to create something different.
That's important. I mean, we often use an expression, Peter Senge actually wrote this, but people really don't resist change. What they resist is being changed.
Yes.
So when you direct somebody in our audience, for example, that they need to do something, and this is exactly what they have to do, they'll tend to turn off to that. But by encouraging them to become more mindful of their own day-to-day activities and to become more aware of the learners that they're serving, we can maybe move them into a position where they're willing to make the kind of changes that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And they can do it even with a classroom with 30 faces, 40 faces in it.
You know, change is not something, it's not flipping a light switch, it's something that can take time. But the first way that effective change happens is people need to be reflective of their practice. And, you know, and think about what they're doing, be willing to let go of things, and then actively learn new ways of doing things. But you had a really good point there that I want to come back to. You know, making people do things does not work. And, you know, within education or any organization, because someone has positional authority, the positional authority may give them the ability to mandate change, to say, if you don't do this, I'm going to write you up or you're going to get a bad evaluation. But positional authority does not give you the ability to make someone care. And you know, caring, the emotion of caring, is what builds that esprit de corps in an organization and what creates change. You know, people are always going to be drawn to you or to the leader of a building or an organization if they understand why they do what they do. So it's not so much, this is what I do, I am a principal. I need to spend time communicating why I am a principal, what I'm interested in. And I'm interested in, you know, intentional instruction, I'm interested in change, I'm interested in growth mindset. So I want to make sure that I'm talking about those things all the time so people really know what I'm about. And the more that I do that, I will hopefully draw people to me who think the same way, and people who don't will not be interested in being part of that organization.
Maybe a teacher should take a look at the change itself as a platform for continual improvement in the classroom also.
That's what that's for. So Evan, your background, you're now a principal of a school, but you used to be an English teacher, I remember from our conversation before the program.
Yes, I was.
So at some point this switch was thrown in your life. What was that like? When did it happen?
Let me clarify that a little bit. The switch in terms of my thinking.
The change that you're talking about today happened to you at some point.
I think that's a really great question, and I can answer that one.
Good.
For me, it came from, as an adult, reflecting more on my personal experiences when I was in grade school. So it wasn't something that necessarily happened in my adult years, but what happened in my adult years was I became more reflective of things that I thought I was incorrectly judging myself about when I was younger. So
Really?
let me give an example.
Sure.
So I thought I was a really good history student when I was in high school. Now, my history class was a very traditional history class, and one that you can probably relate to, and everyone who's listening is going to relate to what I'm going to say now too. Teacher was behind a podium, the teacher lectured, I came in, we had chalkboards back then, no whiteboards.
Right.
The board is filled with notes, you come in, you write down the notes, you listen to the lecture, you do that from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. On Thursday, you do a review game. On Friday, you take a test. And I actually did quite well in that format. I knew some students who didn't do well in that format. But where I was wrong was I made an incorrect conclusion that I was a really good history student. I was really good at taking notes, memorizing information, and regurgitating information for a fact-based, multiple choice, fill in the blank, matching kind of test. But I didn't make the connections to history that I want students to make in my school and in schools all over the country, which is making an emotional connection to history or understanding history in a different way of understanding different perspectives.
I mean, that's important, but it's not about when a battle took place or where a battle took place. What's important are the human beings who made choices that caused the outcome of the battle, whatever that might be. And that context of history is what you weren't getting
Absolutely. And so I started coming to those kind of conclusions and thought, wow, I was a product of some really traditional education. It seemed to work okay for me, but there were a lot of kids that it didn't work for. And what I believe, and I know you gentlemen do also, is that we want every child who enters a school in the United States of America to find success. But if the methodologies that are done in a classroom are the same and don't change, that's not going to necessarily help all children become successful.
Because some people just may not be good test takers, for instance. And
Absolutely, or some people learn different.
Right.
So the really good example is your child says, well, I like my band class. And you say, why? They say, well, I have an opportunity to perform. And I'm engaged in my instrument for the entire class. Well, that tells you something about your child, as a learner also. So what I would say, and this brings up a really interesting discussion of individualized education, personalization of learning, of differentiating of instruction. But in the broadest sense, I would say every class is going to have different types of learners.
Sure.
It would be wrong, it would be a false presumption to believe that every child who comes into the classroom learns exactly the same. And that's actually the false presumption of the history example that I gave you, because that's based off of everyone being able to take notes, everyone being able to be an auditory learner, to hear the lecture, everyone being able to memorize the facts and to regurgitate the facts. But what I would say is that when we apply a growth mindset, we start thinking about the different types of learners that exist in classrooms and the different types of learners that we are. There become opportunities to change the way that we do what we do. And that goes all the way back to the example that you give of a teacher who has 30 kids in the class, how am I going to do this? And what I'm going to say is you got to really start thinking a lot differently about what you do, why you do it, and then most importantly, if it works. Because we don't want to keep doing things if they don't work.
Which means we really have to overcome the tyranny of the curriculum. In a way, a curriculum is a kind of a static path that sometimes we feel we have to drag all of our learners through. And when we say things like, well, I can't answer that question for you, I can't talk to you because I need to get through 10 more slides in this presentation, we're really turning off an opportunity to make exactly the change that you're talking about.
And that can be a problem, because what I would say is, what is the purpose to go through 10 more slides if you know the kids aren't learning it?
And you know that, a teacher knows that.
And that's part of the professional responsibility and decision making that teachers should make when they're in a classroom. A good formative assessment within a classroom is going to inform you about how kids are doing with instruction. And it makes very little sense at all to keep moving through if the kids aren't learning it. Because it only matters really if the learner is actually learning the information. But what I would say is you want the teacher to think differently about how to teach the curriculum. The curriculum is there, the curriculum is static. How you teach the curriculum, how you differentiate the curriculum, how you make the curriculum engaging and interesting to kids is something that is completely within the grasp of the teacher.
Sure.
So the grade isn't the only way I know whether my kids are learning something. There are other ways to know.
I think that good formative assessment can be a lot more than just a numerical grade.
A lot of it's feedback, too, from the students.
Absolutely. There's a saying in education that schools could run without grades, but they can't run without feedback.
Right.
Because feedback is the most important thing in terms of helping a learner grow. And I always give you a little example while we're having our conversation. If you've ever played basketball, and I'm sure there's people that are watching this that play basketball. So imagine that you're at the 3-point line, and I'm the basketball player, and you're my coach, and I'm doing it all wrong. I'm trying to do my shots, and I'm doing it all wrong. So there are a couple different options here. What most coaches would say is they would correct right away. But a lot of things in education, the wrong can be repeated, and then it's corrected at the end. And that doesn't make sense. So I like to give kids, I like kids to have immediate feedback about how they're doing with their learning, and there are lots of ways to do it. And again, it would be wrong to presume that just a numeric grade is the only way to do it.
Well, that's, I'm bubbling with questions, not just about teachers who are very important stakeholders in this process, but also about administrators, school administrators. We haven't had a chance yet to talk about the change that a school principal or a school superintendent needs to make in order to support this kind of a shift.
That's a great question. That's a big question.
Yeah, it is.
But let's talk about it a little bit. We're talking about growth mindset. We're talking about fixed mindset. One of the things that I didn't say earlier, but I'll say it right now, is these are not things that can be compartmentalized in your life. So you can't be someone who's really growth mindset oriented. Let's say your growth mindset, you're a really positive person. You can't be that way at work and be a really unpleasant person at home. It just doesn't work that way. So people who have a fixed mindset, they tend to be that way all the time. People who have a growth mindset, they tend to be that way all the time. Positive people tend to be positive all the time. Negative people tend to be negative. The leader of the building needs to emulate what he or she wants to see within the building. So if growth mindset is something that you want to see in the building, then you need to be leading, emulating, communicating growth mindset. And then one simple way that I like to do it in my school is I love to tell my faculty that there are two ways to get into a swimming pool. And really quite simple. You can dip your feet in the water to see if the water's okay, or you can go off the high dive. And going off the high dive can involve a risk, but it could be a lot of fun also. So the administrator needs to set up an environment where people can feel creative, where people can feel like they can take risks and do things different. Because I can tell you that one of the fears of trying something different is feeling like you're going to fail.
Sure.
And so it's very important for the leader of the building to say, you know, it's okay. I want you to try something, and you might not hit a home run every time you do it, but it's a step forward from doing the same thing that was being done over and over again.
So you set that culture.
Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah, it's all about culture. I mean,
Right.
ultimately, it's about culture. It's about relationships and really clear communications and having people understand
Right.
who you are and what you believe.
Great. Now, we talked about administrators and we've talked about teachers, but I think I want to talk about parents because parents' expectations also come into play. When I decide when my child is 5 years old that I want him or her to grow up to be a chemical engineer, as they make their choices along the way, I may not always be happy with those choices that they make. So teachers also have to work with parents to make sure that they set their expectations in a constructive way. Isn't that right?
It is. You know, I think there's always opportunities for schools to reach out and connect with parents and help them understand how to support their children, you know, in a positive way and to make good decisions when it comes to that. I think that at times, parents of kids who tend to do very well academically in school tend to have parents who did very well academically in school. And one of the changes, and it's not directly stated in our conversation today, but it's certainly implied, is that we're looking at grading differently, we're looking at learning differently. And kids that want to earn an A, if that's their main objective, they may be less inclined to take a risk on a project because they're more interested in making the grade. But what we're talking about here today is a conversation about dynamic learning, changing the way that things are being done in the classroom, and stretching learning from the teacher, and also from the student. So as grading changes, and there's an opportunity for parents to understand. Some parents may not understand the value of a retake because they didn't have that when they were in school. Some parents might think that extra credit is a great thing, and we all probably recall with our kids, you bring in a box of tissues, you get some extra credit.
Right.
You get 10 points on your math test if you bring in a box of tissues. But what does that say about your knowledge of the math test?
Nothing.
It doesn't.
Very
And
little.
again, it's been done for decades. It's one of the things that we need to kind of let go of in education. It wasn't done with bad intentionality, but can paint a false picture of a student's knowledge of a subject based off of that example.
We're coming up on the end of our program, Evan, and this is a good opportunity for you maybe to speak into your camera and tell everybody how to reach you if they have questions.
Thank you very much. I write a blog with Laura Robb. It's called the Robb Review blog, and encourage anyone who's watching this to check it out. We try to put an updated piece on there every week. We have a podcast called the Robb Review Podcast, and you can follow me on Twitter at eRobbPrincipal.
Evan, Robb, what a pleasure it was having you on DisruptEDtv.
Fantastic to be here. I appreciate you all
Absolutely
inviting me
great.
up
Thank
to
you.
Jersey. Fantastic.
And I want to thank all of you for joining us today on DisruptEDtv. My name is Al Cini,
I'm Joe Osamendi.
and we hope you'll join us again for a future episode.
Thank you.